Recording in three, two, and one. Welcome to episode 146 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Big 146. I'm Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of the highs and lows and the ups and downs, the good and the bad, and the nerd and the murd. Oh, God, I feel like I've been sick for like a month.
Eh, sorry, man.
It's all right. Just glad tested negative for flu and COVID, just an upper respiratory infection. So pardon me if I'm coughing or sniffling. I'm trying to trying to kick it finally. So
Well, I mean, if it helps, it does give your voice a sexy toner's quality.
I hope my voice holds out. Um, been all scratchy and everything. Tired of this. Tired of being sick.
You're sick and
Ah,
tired of being sick and tired.
yes. Oh, well, it's just been awful. Just been awful. What you been up to?
Well, they finally got the construction done, so we've been moving stuff into Susie's section of the house,
Cool.
which is nice. Get stuff moved around. And the living room's kind of a disaster, which is why I'm in K3's room.
Yeah.
But stuff's getting done. So that's nice. Getting
Cool.
kind of more of a normalcy. It did a good job too. Really impressed.
Awesome.
Es- yeah, especially with the way that whole thing started.
Well, maybe I could see it in August. We're planning a trip up there in August.
We should have everything
So
cleaned out by August. Yes, you should come by, hang out.
see
If you let
how.
me know when, me and Johnny will put something together. We could have like a little social thing. We've been sitting outside and uh, at the fire pit at night on the weekends. The
Mm-hmm.
last couple of weekends, it's been really nice.
Cool. And one of the things I'm excited about, we do our golf club does affiliate golf clubs or reciprocal golf clubs, whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Anyway, we can play the Colonial
Oh,
at member prices. So I want to
nice.
go play the Colonial.
Yeah.
I really want to
God, it's
go.
beautiful.
I know. Oh, and on top of that, so we got new VR headsets. And there's a golf game that is really, really accurate. It's very, very true to life. It's really cool. And we've got these golf sticks that are on the way that you attach the controller on the end to, so you can actually practice real golfing
Oh,
inside. So
nice.
we can play when it's raining or if it's too cold to go out or anything like that. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. I can't wait to play around with that a little more. So
Yeah, so
I
you can
really
golf when it's raining.
yeah, I like the VR headsets. They're really cool. They're a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Oh my God, we
Um,
got together for a guys' weekend over at your place, and we got it out at a
yep.
what a defuse the bomb game. Oh my God,
Uh,
that was so much
don't
fun.
stop talking or the bomb will go off.
Yeah, we had
That
so
was
much fun
fun.
playing that.
My boss told me that there's a VR game. So with the VR headsets, you map out a boundary around where you're going to be standing, and you want to try to make it. I think it's 6 feet by 6 feet
Yeah,
to avoid walls and things like that.
yeah,
And if you get too close to that boundary, the boundary comes up and lets you know you're about to cross it, so you don't run
like
into
you're
a
about to
wall or
hit a
anything like that.
table or
Yeah. Well, apparently there's this VR game which simulates an intrusion into your house, and you map out your entire home.
oh,
People crawling
it's like
windows
Night
and things
Trap on
like that.
steroids.
I know. I know. It's
That
pretty wild.
sounds pretty fucking awesome.
A little scary too, kind of wild. But yeah, if you haven't checked out any VR headsets, they're a lot of fun. Really cool to play. All right, so I will let you take over on the nerdery side of the house.
Hey, today we're going to talk about three more lesser known sci-fi movies.
All right,
One of them is a Corman movie. It's the first one we're going to talk about. It's called Crime Zone.
okay,
It is also known as Peligrosas in Peru because it was made in Peru. Um, it's a 1988 American Peruvian science fiction action film directed by Luis Losa, written by Daryl Haley, and starring David Carradine, Peter Nelson, Sherilyn Fenn, and Michael Shaner. Carradine plays a mysterious stranger who recruits young lovers in an illicit romance to commit a crime spree in a futuristic police state and promises them an avenue for escape. The film was executive produced by Roger Corman, who came up with the original concept. Due to a perceived lack of Peruvian qualities, it was better received in America uh, than Peruvian critics. Corman's New Concord co-produced and distributed it. After its Los Angeles premiere, it was released on VHS by MGM/UA. Set up as a criminal, Hector, who walks into a police trap. Hector is captured alive at the behest of the police chief and is executed live on television after a brief show trial. Bone, a former security guard who has recently lost his job at a cryogenics facility for not showing the proper respect to authority, meets Helen, a woman forced into prostitution at the government-sanctioned brothel. They're immediately attracted to each other and begin a secret relationship. As unauthorized romantic and sexual activity is illegal for lower class subgrade citizens like themselves. Bone's friend Creon becomes jealous of the relationship and demands that Bone share Helen with him. Disgusted, Bone refuses and they eventually come to blows over Creon's behavior. One day, Bone and Helen, both disillusioned with Soleil's repressive society, steal some money from a supermarket. They're observed by a mysterious man named Jason, who is David Carradine, who offers them a passage to Frodan, another nation at war with Soleil, in exchange for stealing records from a secure facility disguised as a hospital. Although suspicious of his offer, they accept the successfully deliver the information to Jason, who attempts to delay their reward and talk them into further criminal acts. Frustrated and short on money, Bone and Helen rob a bank, quickly becoming the most wanted criminals in Soleil. Creon attempts to blackmail Helen, but she dismisses his threats before Creon can attack her. Bone saves her and tells Creon that he would kill him if he weren't leaving Soleil so soon. After losing faith in Jason's promises, Bone and Helen recruit their friend JD and Alexi to help them escape. That's kind of the setup of the film. Executive producer Roger Corman came up with the film's concept, recruited Peruvian director Luis Loza to make a futuristic thriller. Geoffrey Middens recounts what he calls an apocryphal story in which Corman signed a deal with Loza while Corman was briefly delayed in a stopover in Peru. The film was shot in Peru and used postmodern architecture to affect a futuristic style. The extras were students and instructors from the American School of Lima. Loza said he focused more on the art direction than dialogue, and he shot at night to disguise the low budget. The film was a co-production between Corman's New Concord and Loza's Iguana Films. So the thing about Crime Zone is it looks like a big budget picture, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not.
I'd never heard
Uh,
of this movie.
oh my God, it is so good. Sherilyn Fenn is so good in this. She she basically carries the story. Um, the character of Bone, that actor, he's okay. He's not great, but then again, he's really kind of not supposed to be. You know what I mean? There's not he didn't have a lot to work with, so you could see him not being terrible. He's fine. Um, their friend Creon and their two other friends, JD and Aker, I think. Um, those actors are phenomenal, and of course, David Carradine is great. Um, and the thing about these three movies, um, there's a screw job at the end of this. Um, Jason, and okay, spoilers ahead. This movie is 35 years old. Spoilers ahead. Jason's working for the government. Um, the government needs to keep the police state, to keep funding the police, needs high profile criminals ever so often. So they go out and recruit them. And that's what Jason's job is. He does get them to Frodan at the end. But there's also a screw job on that. And I won't give that part away because it's like the last couple of minutes of the movie. They do get away. But it's it's not exactly what they were promised. Let's put it that way. And all three of these films kind of have a twist in them that we're talking about today. But yeah, Crime Zone was incredible. It's on. I want to say Tubi right now.
Hmm.
If it's out there, it's easy to get. All three of these films you can go out and watch. I think I may have put in, put in, I think I may have
But
put, yeah, all of them in our YouTube playlist. I think there's a full movie in there. Primer's the one that's the most difficult to find right now, but I could find it like a month ago, so it should pop up. By the time this episode airs, you should be able to go out and find Primer too. But yeah, Crime Zone is one of those films that's it kind of flew under the radar, but it was like Hardware. It was it was the film nerds sci-fi movie of the moment. Um, Actually, this was it was Crime Zone, and then Hardware kind of took over after that. It's great. It's phenomenal. If you haven't seen it, this is definitely one to check
mm-mm.
out.
No, because I'd never even heard it.
Mm-hmm. David Carradine's great in it. Sherilyn Fenn's great in it. Again, the guy that plays Bone, he's not great, but he doesn't necessarily have to be. Most of the acting kind of centers on Sherilyn Fenn. And she's great. Um, it's a variation on the theme. She used a lot of the same sort of ideas and ways of behaving. It's the same thing she used in Twin Peaks like a year later, 2 years later. But yeah, it's really good. If you haven't seen it, it's a good movie. Again, it's a Roger Corman film, but because it was filmed in, throughout downtown Quito, is that right? Quito in Peru. Occasionally you'll get a shot of an old wall. That's an Incan wall. There's actually you'll get a shot of an Incan wall, and then this hyper this hyper futuristic area, which is like a downtown mall or something.
Mm.
Anyway, it's beautiful, wonderfully shot. Um, it looks dystopian. I don't know, but yeah, it's one of those that you should go back out and check out. When I was putting this list together, I sat down and watched it again just to make sure it was still as good as I remembered. And again, I saw it on video originally because that's what they did. They released it in LA and Peru, and then they put it on video, and that's where it kind of lived. But yeah, it's one of those that you should really check out. Crime Zone. Um, and it's a Corman film, so the poster is exceptional. The next film is Primer.
Is what?
Pri- Primer.
Primer. Okay.
Yep, Primer. Primer is a 2004 American independent psychological science fiction film about the accidental discovery of time travel. The film was written, directed, produced, edited, and scored by Shane Carruth in his debut feature, uh, and it also stars with David Sullivan. Primer is of note for its extremely low budget experimental plot structure, philosophical implications, and complex technical dialogue,
Dude, this
which,
movie was filmed on a budget of $7,000.
yeah, and it does not look it.
Holy cow.
It was also filmed in Dallas, baby. Yeah. It filmed over 5 weeks on the outskirts of Dallas, Texas. The film was produced on a budget of $7,000 with a skeleton crew of five. Carruth acted as writer, director, producer, cinematographer, editor, and music composer. He also stars in the film as Aaron, and many of the other characters are played by his friends and family. The small budget required conservative use of the Super 16 millimeter film stock. The carefully limited number of takes resulted in an extremely low shooting ratio of 2-1, which is unheard of. Every shot in the film was meticulously storyboarded on 35 millimeter stills. Carruth created a distinctive, flat, overexposed look for the film by using fluorescent lighting, non neutral color temperatures, high speed film stock, and filters. After shooting, Carruth took 2 years to fully post produce Primer. He has since said that the experience was so arduous that he almost abandoned the film several occasions. I'm glad he didn't. Um, eh, Carruth, a college graduate with a degree in mathematics and a former engineer, chose not to simply for the sake of the audience to just kind of gin up the technical aspects of the film. Everything that he said is accepted theory. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, and they kind of stumbled upon it. So while writing the script, Carruth studied physics to help him make Abe and Aaron's technical dialogue sound authentic. He took the unusual step of eschewing a contrived exposition and tried instead to portray the shorthand phrases and jargon used by working scientists. The philosophy carried over into production design. Time Machine itself is a plain gray box with a distinctive electronic hum created by overlaying the sounds of a mechanical grinder and a car engine, rather than by using a processed digital effect. Carruth also set the story in unglamorous industrial park and suburban tract homes. Carruth chose to deliberately obfuscate the film's plot to mirror the complexity and confusion created by time travel. As he said in a 2004 interview, the machine and Abe and Aaron's experience are inherently complicated, so it needed to be that way in order for the audience to be where Abe and Aaron are, um, which was always Carruth's hope. Um, so in this film, these guys are doing they're 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 both working, but they're also doing like postgraduate work. And they were trying to come up with, I can't remember originally what they were trying to do. Um, but they basically stumbled upon creating a time machine. And it does. It looks like a gray box. Almost like a an industrial air conditioning unit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the kind that's actually up in the ceiling, you know, with conduit coming out of it. Of course, wires running everywhere. Um, and they figure it out and they start doing short time travels. There is also a screw job in this film as well. Um, One of the characters starts using it more than
Sorry
he's
for those of
supposed
you
to.
who aren't watching the video. Apparently, running circles with your fingers through the air is a screw
Yeah,
job.
is a screw job.
Okay.
Oh, look, they're perfectly timed too. Uh, anyway, so yeah, there's a bit of a screw job going on there. This film, I don't want to say it looks like a high-end film. It definitely has an indie film feel to it, but it doesn't look like they made it for 7,000 bucks. You know what I mean? You know, it doesn't look like it was five guys shooting it in Irving, which is what it was.
It's like
Um,
Clerks doesn't look
yes.
like it because I think that was made on $25,000,
Yep.
and
$25,000.
that does. I mean that while it's not high budget looking or anything, it certainly doesn't look like it was made on 25,000. So that's
No,
that's just impressive. $7,000 budget.
$7,000 budget. Yep. And it took him 2 years to get it edited and put together because, like, he would work a little bit, make a little money, work on the film, work a little bit, make a little money, film. You know, um, I remember seeing this film just as a lark. I'm like, Primer, what is that? And I kind
Hmm.
of read the description. It was like, oh, it's a science fiction film. I've got it on DVD around here somewhere. I picked it up pretty cheap, went home and watched it, loved it, watched it again to see if I could figure out where the screw job starts. Sorry, doing the finger thing again. Um, so these guys basically stumble into making a time machine and they start using it to benefit themselves to make a little money here or there, you know. Um, and then one of the guys realizes that his partner has been doing it um, for a while, and there's a bit of a paradox in which the one guy kind of who's been doing it more than he was supposed to kind of went back a little further than he was supposed to and kind of gave them the idea for the time machine, like it created itself, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
And basically but the time machine is, it's weird because you go into the box You get in the box, um, you turn it on, and you basically wake up in the exact same spot, but you're there a few days earlier. So they can only go back so far. Um, and then they discover that there's a second box in a storage facility. Sit down and watch it. It is very confusing, but he meant it that way. Because you don't just stumble upon a time machine, um, and it not be confusing, if that makes sense. I love this film. Again, I've seen it several times. I wanted to watch it again to kind of bone up because it's been a couple of years since I've seen it. And I can't find where the DVD is that I had. But it wasn't available, which is weird because I'd seen it available just a few months before. So, like I said, by the time this airs, it may be out again. Uh, the producer has will sell it to streaming services and stuff to make his money back. It did show at a couple of festivals, and it will stream every once in a while. I think it was on Hulu for a long time. Um, it was on Amazon for a while. Again, it's not available right now. Actually, I haven't checked it in the last few days. It may be available right now, but it's one of those that you need to sit down and watch it. It's very sciencey. It is a good hard sci-fi uh, time travel flick, and the fact that he made it for $7,000 allures me. You know, and it's nice to see suburbs of Dallas and whatnot because the area looks very familiar. I was like, dude, I know I have been in this area before, but he used real nondescript areas. So there's a lot of areas around Dallas that look like that. So I can't 100% pinpoint where it was he filmed it,
It's not a
but
long
it's,
movie at all. It's only 77 minutes long.
yeah, yeah. And you jump right into it. Um, Again, it's one of those ones you should check out if you haven't seen it. It's like Crime Zone, it kind of flew under the radar. And if you weren't if you weren't in the know, you would have totally let this pass you by. But yeah, this is one of those indie films it's great and it's a good piece of science fiction. Very technical. So there's going to be a lot of technical jargon thrown at you. But the technical jargon they throw around because he went and studied physics for a couple of years is correct as far as theory goes. It's really nice. The next film, which was actually more of a big budget film, is Existence, spelled capital E, capital X, ISTEN, capital Z. Existence. It is a 1999 science fiction horror film written, produced, and directed by David Cronenberg. The film follows Allegra Geller, Jennifer Jason Leigh, a game designer who finds herself targeted by assassins while playing a virtual reality game of her own creation. An international co-production between Canada, the United Kingdom, and France. It also stars Jude Law, Ian Holm, Don McKellar, Calum Keith Rennie, Sarah Polley, Christopher Eccleston, Willem Dafoe, and Robert A. Silver.
Jennifer Jason Leigh is in the latest season of Fargo.
Is she really?
And the latest season of Fargo is so good. So good.
I need to go check that out.
It's
What
uh
what time period does it take place in?
modern. Modern,
Oh,
I think was it 2019?
okay, so it's real modern
Very,
because they
very,
keep
very
they
modern.
they jump around with the times. It's like they're exploring crime in this one area, and they'll jump around like from the 1910s, 70s, and it's the 80s, and then it's like ten years ago or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, I think this
Love
one
that.
is relatively modern. I mean in order of my least favorite up to the best, season 5 is probably number 3 for me because season 4 I didn't really like that much. Season
Hmm.
3 was good, but it was too slow of a burn. The that was the season where Ewan McGregor played two characters.
Oh yeah, he played
Um,
twins, right?
yeah, and then season 5, which is excellent. Um, season 1 and then season 2, I think is the best. But season 5 is just right up there with 1 and 2. See, I spent so much time during during season 5 for the first, I don't know, 2 to 3 episodes. Things would just happen, and I'm just watching it going, "What the fuck is going on?"
Nice.
Excuse me, so sorry. Yeah, so anyway, just Jennifer Jason Leigh reminded me that she's in season 5.
Yeah. Well, kids, guys should check that out. She she's really, really hardcore in this film. This film was actually kind of a big movie. It just didn't
Mhm.
go anywhere. Not many people saw it. It was kind of a flop. But it's the year 2030.
Yeah, 15 million budget and it only made 5.5 at the box
Yeah,
office.
yeah, it was a flop. Yeah, again, this I think this movie lived a little bit better on video. Yeah, I like it, but it is kind of a screw job. It is a little reminiscent of Naked Lunch.
Okay, not gonna watch it.
It, I mean, in the design choices,
Fucking hate
not in
Naked
the
Lunch.
storyline. Yeah,
Fucking
in the
hate
year
it.
in the year 2030, ultra sustainable biotechnological devices have replaced unsustainable electronic ones. Game pods present umbicords that attach to bioport connectors surgically inserted into players' spines. Two game companies, Antenna Research and Cortical Systems, compete against each other. In addition, a group of fanaticals called realists fight both companies to prevent the deformity of reality. Antenna researcher Allegra Geller, world-renowned game designer, is demonstrating her latest virtual reality game, Existence, to a focus group. A realist named Noel Dichter shoots Allegra in the shoulder with an organic pistol he smuggled past security. As the security team guns down Dichter, security guard and publicist Ted Peichel rushes to Geller and escorts her outside. Geller discovers that her pod, which contains the only copy of Existence, may have been damaged. Peichel reluctantly agrees to have a bioport installed in his spine so they can jointly test the game's integrity. Allegra takes him to a gas station run by a black marketeer named Gas, who deliberately installs a faulty bioport. He reveals his intention to kill Geller for the bounty on her head. Peichel kills Gas, and the two escape to a former ski lodge used by Curie Vincor, Geller's mentor. Vicor and his assistants repair the damaged pod and give Peichel a new bio.
You know what? I think I would actually like to take a drill and put it into my ear hole and just slowly pull the trigger versus watching Naked Lunch.
We, we,
Sorry, still on that.
we. the, the film's plot came about after Cronenberg conducted an interview with Salman Rushdie for Shift magazine in 1995. At the time, Rushdie was in hiding due to a fatwa having been put on his life due to his controversial book.
Satanic verses.
Yes, Rushdie's Dilemma gave Cronenberg an idea of a fatwa against a virtual reality game design. Existenz was originally pitched to Metro Goldwyn Mayer, but they did not greenlight the film due to its complex structure. And when I say complex structure, I mean it. So what you discover is that they go into the game of existence, and it's a world within a world, right? And they get pulled out back into this, where they have the bioports and stuff. At the end of the film, you realize that's a game too. They're in a focus group in like this old abandoned church with electronic devices, not biological ones, on their heads. It's just weird. And all the people who died and stuff pop up and go, "Oh my God, that was so cool." After they killed me off, I went into this waiting room and I was able to watch the whole thing like a movie.
There's an episode of Black Mirror in the last season that came out, I think it was, that had an episode like this where a guy went into um he did a demo for a horror video game
Yeah.
and he kept coming out of the game, but he was still in the game. And it
Yeah.
was just this endless loop that he thought he was out of the game, but he was still in the game. And it was really, really wild, really wild.
Good stuff. This is basically the same sort of thing. And again, like the other two films, there's a bit of a screw job going on. and there's clues to it. Cronenberg throws clues into it. You'll see the dog, this big Irish wolfhound, just run through the scene for no reason. It's because the dog is actually in the room um, that they're doing the real world testing. So basically, when the dog runs through the scene, and it'll just be like in the background, or it'll even be in the foreground, it just runs across the screen, right? Um, so watch for it because sometimes you don't even notice it's there. And that is basically the dog walking around uh, trying to get pets.
Oh, and Vic Sahay is in this
Oh my God, this movie is incredible.
from Chuck.
Yep.
Lester from Chuck.
Yep. Yeah, this is a great movie.
Huh.
But again, it flew under the radar. It was going to be this great big science fiction epic, and it's not really a horror movie, even though it's Cronenberg. It's a straight up science fiction film, but there's a lot of action. Um, Jude Law's great in it. Jennifer Jason Leigh's great in it, but she's great in everything she does. Jennifer Jason Leigh could come out and read the phone book, and it'd be good. You know that the third season of The Naked Lunch, she's in it for all of maybe 10 minutes all
I'm sorry.
together.
Third season.
I'm sorry, I said third season. I said Naked Lunch. I meant Twin Peaks. We were talking
Oh.
about Naked Lunch.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that third. She's in that. Yeah, she and Tim Roth are killers, hired killers. Um, their scenes together, even again, maybe 20 minutes all together because they're in several episodes, but they're only in it for a minute or two at a time.
Hmm.
Their stuff is just great. Love Jennifer Jason Leigh. Willem Dafoe is in it. He's great. I I love everybody in this movie. Um, Lester from Chuck.
Right.
What's the actor's name?
Vic Sahay.
Uh, Vic Sahay. Yeah. He's great in it. Um, just yeah, just love it. And again, there's a screw job going on. So the films are um, Existence, Primer, and Crime Zone. There are three movies that everybody should get out there and see because they didn't get enough love when they were originally out, and they're great science fiction movies. And they are straight up all three full, hard pressed, hardcore science fiction films. And Existence had a big budget. Primer and Crime Zone did not, but you can't really tell. You can't tell that they were low budget films. Primer maybe,
Hmm.
but Primer doesn't look like it was made for $7,000. $7,000, and they used film. That's not like a digital movie because digital movie you buy the camera, you're basically done. They had to buy the film, get it processed. Now, granted, they shot it on 60 mil, which is cheaper than 35 mil, but they had to they had to get it processed, get the sound put on it, get the color done, get color timing, light metering, the whole bit. 7 grand. I bet most of the cost was for the 16 millimeter film and the processing. If I were, if I were,
If you were a betting man.
yeah, if I were a bet, because that stuff, I think a whole setup was back in the late 80s, early 90s when I was looking into it for a full 16 millimeter set. You could buy a whole setup for $1,500, not counting the film, for 16 mil. And that was a deal. So yeah, that's about right. But yeah, that's about it for those three films, other than get out and check them out. They're readily available streaming. If you have hard physical media, you can probably find them at your half price books, used bookstores, used video stores, which are making a comeback, strangely enough, because people want physical media and they're streaming on occasion. But two of them are streaming right now. Primer should be back up by the time this airs somewhere.
I could care less about physical media anymore. I mean, I don't even have a DVD player or a Blu-ray player anymore. Everything's streaming. Everything's streaming.
Everything's streaming.
Yep. 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 Well, cool. Thanks for bringing us those.
Sure.
Uh, it's just kind of coincidental. We've got our wife swap coming up on episode 150, and I'm going to be doing three lesser known sci-fi. So we've got more coming up in just a few episodes. So stay tuned for that. But thanks for that. Thanks for taking us through those. Hopefully people get out and take a look at those. Let us know what you think. With that, I will step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off Fox 6 Milwaukee, the Love is Greater Than Hate Project, the Washington Insider, and Medium, and this is the murder of Jessie Blodgett.
Jessie Blodgett.
So on the evening of Sunday, July 14th, 2013, 19-year-old aspiring actress, singer, and musician Jessie Blodgett took center stage in a production of Fiddler on the Roof to the delight of a packed house in Hartford, Wisconsin.
Yabba dabba dabba dee, yabba dabba dabba die. If I were a rich man, very, very. Okay, I'll stop.
I'm not a Fiddler on the Roof fan. It was clear to everyone in attendance that she loved the spotlight and the spotlight loved her. And after taking their final bows, the cast and crew had gathered together for a pool party to celebrate their successful adaptation of the popular musical. While the outgoing and popular young woman had thoroughly enjoyed herself early on, the disturbing behavior of two of her fellow actors and cast had cast a pall over the evening. Later that night, Jessie had taken to her journal to vent her frustrations. She lamented the fact that she was, quote, being corrupted by some of the men in her life, whom she felt were mistaking her friendly nature for something more. She had concluded the entry with the optimistic declaration, quote, I am not helpless. I will recognize problems and confront them without fear. God be with me. Before retiring to bed, she told her mother, Joy, that two men at the party, who were both well into their 40s, had made passes at her. She had,
Oh, she's a high school student?
yeah, well, 19.
Oh, oh,
She's not a
college
high school
production.
student.
Sorry.
Yeah. Um, she had elaborated by sharing that one of them had been so aggressive that he had pulled her onto his lap without her against her will. She wondered aloud why it seemed impossible for members of the opposite sex to simply be friends and nothing more, but her words would prove particularly ominous in light of what was to come. At 8 o'clock,
Okay, yeah, dude, I'd like to point this out. I will say this about us. Yay, us. You and I have lots of women friends who are just our friends.
correct.
Yeah, yeah. It it is okay. It's not weird. It's what makes you a more well-rounded person. Okay, I've said my
Right.
piece.
Right.
Thank you.
No, and
Thank you.
and you're right. I mean, it always bothers me that you can have a friend at work that's a woman and you could be close with that friend and yet everybody thinks something is going on.
Yeah.
Something sexual or something
Hmm.
beyond friends. Is like you can just have friends of the opposite sex.
Yes,
It's
you can.
yeah. Anyway. Um at 8 o'clock the next morning, Joy, her mom, had looked in on her only child to make sure everything was all right, and seeing she was fast asleep, she headed on to work. Her husband Buck had left earlier, that leaving Jessie just to hold down the fort by herself. When noontime rolled around, Joy returned home for lunch, as was her usual routine. And when she entered the house, she noticed that Jessie hadn't woken yet. And since she knew that one of her daughter's piano students would be showing up any minute for her scheduled lesson, her mother went upstairs to wake her up. When she cracked open the bedroom door and called her name, Jessie failed to respond, and she figured she was still worn out from the activities of the play the previous night, and so she approached the bed and gave her daughter a shoulder a gentle shake. But as she made contact, she noticed that the skin was icy beneath her hand. She pulled back the covers and she saw that that there was an unnatural bluish hue that had taken over her features. And it was then that the horror of the situation suddenly took hold. Her mind struggled to process what she was seeing, and she noticed that Jessie's hair and night clothes were soaking wet. Her heart was pounding, but she called 911 and her husband Buck to tell him that she thought that Jessie was dead. While she waited for help to arrive, she saw that there were ligature marks on her daughter's neck. She, this situation she thought was impossible, but she was slowly coming to terms that a monster had been inside their house.
Hmm.
Within minutes, the house was swarming with first responders. And as they were securing the scene, Buck arrived and joined his wife in what was really a nightmare.
Oh yeah.
As they were watching all the events unfold, they learned that Jessie had more than likely been strangled to death, which the ligatures on the neck. There were also deep abrasions on her wrists that indicated she had been bound at some point. Investigators soon determined that an intruder had entered the house earlier that morning through an unlocked door after Joy left for work. After making his way to Jessie's room, he had incapacitated her by tying her hands together before subjecting her to a particularly brutal rape. And when the perpetrator was finished, he used the ligature to kill her. The assumption from the get-go was that the killer was someone known to the family. Detectives theorized that only an individual who was familiar with the Blodgett's comings and goings would have known that they seldom locked their doors, believing it wasn't necessary since they lived in a neighborhood where crime of any kind was virtually unheard of.
And this was like a 3 to 4 hour window, something like that.
I think she said that she left around, hang on, I need to
She
look.
got back. She got back around noon.
She left at 8 o'clock and then got back around noon, so about 4 hours.
4 hours. And it takes a while for someone to get cold.
Yeah.
So we're probably talking between 8 and 11. Good God, they were well. Okay, way to go, local investigation team, for jumping on this really quickly.
Well, I mean, you kind of have to. It's a murder.
Yeah,
It's not one you can go, well, we'll get to it when we can.
yeah, it's true.
Um, so it was also telling the detectives that whoever entered the house that morning had known that Jesse would be the only one home between 8 and noon, as we just talked about, which gave them time to carry out their plan. They started at square one. Investigators looked through Jessie's journals in the hopes that she had mentioned being fearful of someone in her inner outer circle. And remember, she had talked about in the journal, and she had talked about how that one actor had manhandled her the previous night. So they sought him out for questioning. They did discover that he had called off work on Monday morning, and so their interest with him spiked. And they spoke to him, and he admitted he had overstepped his boundaries, but contended that he didn't mean her any harm. He did provide detectives with a solid alibi, so he was then cleared. But to cross all their T's, they also interviewed the other partygoer who had made Jesse uncomfortable, but he was quickly eliminated as suspect as well. So with their two possible promising persons of interest no longer viable, investigators cast a wider net to catch the killer. In what was initially believed an unrelated incident, 3 days before Jesse was murdered, there was a young woman named Melissa Etzler who was walking her dog in a nature park in nearby Richfield when she was attacked by a knife-wielding stranger. Melissa recalled that as she and her dog passed by a van parked in the visitors area, a man had jumped out and tackled her from behind. He'd raised a knife and tried to stab her, but she grabbed the blade and refused to let go. The two of them struggled for control of the weapon for a while before Melissa was able to wrench it from his hand. And when the attacker realized that his victim was in control, the would-be assailant had nervously blurted out, "Can I just go?" Stunned by the ridiculous request, Melissa informed him that he wasn't going anywhere, and she quickly phoned the police. However, she couldn't stop him from running to his vehicle, and he sped away, but she made sure to keep the knife in her possession. Officers arrived on that scene and they were shocked by looking at Melissa's hands because they had been shredded by the blade of a fillet knife that she had held onto. She had, however, kept her wits about her despite these traumatic events and just taken place. Melissa went to give a remarkably detailed description of her attacker.
Well, yeah, because she wore his ass out.
Yeah. So
She
she
wore his
said,
ass out. She got a good look at him.
yes, she did. She said that he was a white male with sandy blonde hair, pale skin, 18 to 20 years of age, 6'2", and around 210 pounds, wearing plaid shorts. She also knew the color, make, and model of the vehicle he had driven, which was a dark blue older model Dodge Caravan. So after giving her statement, she had been taken to the nearest hospital. When it was all said and done, she had 15 stitches to close the wounds on her fingers and palms.
Wow.
So when the description of the attacker and his mode of transportation were shared with other law enforcement agencies in the district, a deputy who routinely patrolled the park came forward to say he was certain he had seen the van in the very same spot a few weeks earlier. And although the driver wasn't doing anything wrong technically, something about him made him feel uneasy. So as a precaution, he'd run the plates so that the owner's name was now on record. So investigators checked out this lead, but they were disappointed to find out that the van's owner was a middle-aged man who couldn't possibly have been the perpetrator. However, learning that he had a teenage son, they felt that they might be on the right track after all. So detectives sat down with the registered owner and they found him to be a fountain of information. He offered to help in any way he could and told investigators that his 20-year-old son Dan often drove the van. Their interest in Dan was further heightened when they learned that he was blonde-haired and a young man who stood an impressive 6'1" and weighed in at 200 pounds.
Oh, hello.
So Dan Bartlett wasn't at home at the time, but his father had provided detectives with his cell phone number in order to clear up any misunderstandings. And in an odd coincidence that hadn't seemed particularly significant at the time, when they reached their potential suspect, he was attending a vigil for Jessie Blodgett at her parents' house.
Hmm.
As it turned out, Dan and Jessie had been classmates in high school and even dated briefly. And while their romantic endeavor hadn't worked out, their friendship had remained on solid ground well past graduation. They had been bonded together in part by their mutual love of musical theater, and the pair were the best of friends. Others that were present on the day of Jesse's memorial remember seeing Dan taking the call from the police. And after ending the communication, he had nonchalantly announced to the group of mourners that he had to go meet with detectives about something or other. And with that, he had given Joy and Buck one last hug, dried his eyes, and headed out the door. On the police end, detectives were struck by the fact that Dan hadn't asked why they wanted to speak with him. In their experience, it was unusual for anyone to agree to come down to the station so readily. And while his surprising lack of curiosity isn't a crime, it had given him pause. As soon as Dan sat down with the investigators, they got straight to the point and they asked him where he was on the morning that Melissa was attacked. His alibi was that he had spent the entire day with his good friend Jessie Blodgett, who tragically was now deceased. Seizing on this unexpected opportunity, detectives asked him what he knew about the events that had taken place in the Blodgett's home on that fateful Monday morning. Without missing a beat, he replied that Jessie had been raped and murdered in her bedroom. This is a key point to remember.
Hmm.
They gave Dance a quick once over, and investigators couldn't help but notice he had multiple cuts and abrasions on his hands and arms that appeared to be fresh. And they inquired of the nature of the injuries, but he had shrugged them off as just a result of a minor accident at work. However, what detectives knew that Dan didn't is that his father had already told them that he was unemployed.
Hmm.
So after catching him in this blatant lie, they pressed him to come clean. And he
Did
basically,
everybody know what happened in the bedroom?
that's the key point. They hadn't said anything about the rape.
That's right.
So when they asked him about they caught him in the lie and told him that he needed to tell the truth. He suddenly recalled he had cut his hand and forearm in a cooking mishap. They were skeptical of this, and investigators let him know in no uncertain terms that his feeble attempt at explanation didn't ring true. After all, there was no shame in being a clumsy chef and therefore no reason to lie. And then after taking a deep breath, Dan confessed to the attack on Melissa. So they're asking about Jesse, and now he's suddenly confessing about his attack on Melissa.
Hmm.
He elaborated by saying he often went to the park to write in peace, and it seemed that he had been working on a novel for years and he had found the setting conducive to his creativity. He explained that oftentimes when his parents thought he was in school or working, he was actually sitting in the van watching people and toiling away at what he envisioned would be his magnum opus. And when they asked him what made him decide to attack an innocent girl walking her dog, The coldness of his reply had chilled the room. According to him, he merely, quote, wanted to scare someone. So he was a ne'er-do-well who was a jobless college dropout with no plans for the future. He then explained that he had been so frightened by the world around him that he wanted to release his growing fear onto somebody else. So, having his admissions in hand, detectives placed Dan under arrest for aggravated assault. And although they were now aware he had been close to Jessie Blodgett, they had no reason to believe that her murder and attack in the park were related. But since the interview with Dan had taken place early on in the investigation into Jessie's homicide, detectives working Melissa's case weren't aware that Jessie had been raped. So again, Dan
Mm-hmm.
did know that.
Mm-hmm.
While they had been in the dark, Dan was being interrogated in regard to an entirely different matter. He had readily offered up that important bit of information that we mentioned. Since only the perpetrator would have known about the sexual assault, Dan's slip of the tongue had put him at the top of the suspect list once the autopsy results were made available to members of law enforcement. When he was questioned about Jessie's murder, Dan had denied any involvement, which had come as a surprise to no one. They obtained a search warrant for his personal belongings. Investigators found disturbing images on his computer that allowed them to look into the darker inner workings of his mind. Among other things, he had routinely looked up materials related to serial killers and their methods. Disturbingly, he had also searched for snuff films, which, if you don't know, they're underground films which allegedly show a victim, usually a female, being raped and murdered on live camera. Snuff films were some big ones in the 80s,
Yep.
late 70s and 80s.
Yep.
Various other pornographic images were also found on his electronic devices, many of which depicted violence against women. And in one of the videos he viewed, a woman is being seen raped and strangled by a killer who then washes her body and places her back in bed, covering her with a blanket as if she's only sleeping. Wasn't lost on detectives at this point that the acts being portrayed on the film eerily mirrored what happened to Jessie in what should have been the safety of her own bedroom. And even when confronted with this damning evidence, Dan refused to budge. He did, however, amend his story. Now, instead of being close friends, he claimed that he and Jessie had rekindled their romantic relationship in the weeks leading up to her death. He explained that he hadn't wanted to say anything out of respect for his girlfriend, who didn't know that he was seeing someone else. And he had gone on to say that he had told his parents he was going to work on the morning of the murder, when actually he had spent most of the day either riding at Woodlawn Union Park or driving around aimlessly. Detectives then checked out CCTV footage taken in the park and confirmed he had been on the grounds on July 15th. So for once, it seemed he was telling the truth. On a hunch, investigators paid a visit to the park where they searched the trash cans for evidence. And inside one of the cans, they found a cereal box containing a ball gag, ligatures, and several blood-soaked disinfectant wipes. And lengths of rope were also discovered in the trash, which were later matched to the marks on Jessie's neck. So the case against Dan was heating up by the minute, and a search warrant was executed on his house. In addition to finding more of the same style of rope in the garage, investigators found tape on the air ducts that matched discarded samples Joy discovered under her daughter's bed in the days after the murder, as well as strips retrieved from the scene of Melissa Etzler's botched abduction. When the various pieces of tape were examined by forensics experts, they were found to be covered with Dan's fingerprints. The evidence being collected painting a terrifying picture of Jessie's last moments. From what they could gather, detectives were convinced that Dan had entered the residence shortly after Joy had left for work. Once inside, he had crept up to Jessie's room where he hogtied her and placed a ball gag in her mouth, securing it with tape. And he then raped her before strangling her to death with rope that he had brought along for that very purpose. When he was sure she was dead, he had washed her hair and body in an attempt to destroy evidence. And after placing her back in the bed and covering her with a blanket, he had headed to the park to dispose of the implements of his crime. Little did he know at the time the alibi he provided when the police came calling would lead to his undoing, as it was discovered that the items were still in the park's trash can days later. And to solidify the case against him, Dan's DNA matched the samples taken from Jessie's rape kit, as well as those that had been scraped from under her fingernails.
That's why he told them that
Hmm.
he'd been seeing her again.
Yep. To the final nail in the coffin, though, both his DNA and that of the victim were confirmed to be present on the ligatures.
Uh-oh.
Yep. So on July 31st, 2013, Dan was officially charged with first-degree intentional homicide of Jessie. In addition, he was also held over for trial for attempted first-degree murder and first-degree reckless endangerment and false imprisonment in relation to the attack on Melissa. On October 14th, 2014, a jury deliberated for 3 hours before finding him guilty of Jessie's murder. He was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And it was a victory for the victim's family as well as the prosecutor, who had described the defendant as the most dangerous criminal he had ever met. When Dan was given a chance to speak at his sentencing, he had used the opportunity to plead his innocence, telling Jesse's family that the prison uniforms and restraints, quote, "don't make me guilty." He offered no apologies, even as Jesse's father forgave him in open court for his acts. And in exchange for pleading guilty to the charges of attempted to abduct and murder Melissa, Dan was sentenced to a paltry 5 years behind bars with an additional 5 of supervision tacked on for good measure. Thankfully, though, he's never going to walk the streets as a free man, so these last determinations really were more or less symbolic.
Yep.
In September of 2017, Dan appealed the verdict in Jesse's case to the Wisconsin Supreme Court on the grounds he had provided information to detectives that were used against him without a lawyer present. And after careful review of the tactics used by investigators during the course of their search for answers in the death of Jessie, the court upheld Dan's guilty verdict. As of August 23rd, 2023, he is being housed at the Waupun Correctional Facility in West Bend, Wisconsin, where he will remain, barring anything unseen, for the rest of his natural life. Um, the horrifying details of what happened in Jesse's room on that morning will probably always be shrouded in mystery, since the only living witness exists in a perpetual state of denial. The odds are he'll never expose the depth of his depravity to the light. While it isn't in doubt that the terror that Jessie must have felt when she realized she was about to die at the hands of someone she both loved and trusted is unimaginable, and sadly, despite the countless hours they had spent together over the years, she had really never known him at all. Although her life had come to a tragic end, Jessie had made every minute of her short time on Earth count. Again, she was a gifted singer and all-around performer. She was planning on pursuing a career in the arts at the time of her death. To earn extra money, she had worked as a children's piano and violin instructor, and her goodness and patience had endeared her to her students and their parents alike. Besides her love in music in all forms, the University of Wisconsin sophomore was a staunch supporter of such causes as animal rights and environmental protection. She was also an anti-bullying advocate in school and, ironically, an outspoken warrior against domestic violence, especially among high school and college students. Although Jessie didn't live to see the social changes she envisioned come to pass, the loved ones she left behind are determined to see that she did not die in vain. And to that end, in 2016, her father Buck established the Love is Greater Than Hate project in her honor. This
Nice.
organization's mission statement includes the pledge to work towards ending male on female violence and inspiring love over hate through education and social programs aimed at teaching those with aggressive tendencies a better way to channel their energy. In the end, how high Jessie would have flown had she been given the chance will never be known. That her life was taken by an individual who had worn the guise of a friend when he was in fact her worst enemy is yet another sad factor in this unsettling case. And that's the story of the murder of Jessie Blodgett.
Well, thank you for that. That was fascinating. I do want to I do want to give a shout out for I know we always talk about bad police people, but these guys were kind of they seemed like they were really on it.
Yeah,
They had it
yeah, I'd
figured
agree
out
on that.
pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah, we do cover some where it takes them so long. I mean, we'd covered John List that took what 30 30 plus years, 40 plus years, however
Yep.
much it was for them to find him. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
well, they knew it was him. They couldn't find him. But a lot of these stories, yeah, it takes them so long to narrow down the suspects. They did seem to be on it pretty quick.
Yep.
So, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Well, thank you. That'll take us to the end of another recording week. As always, you can find more about our show on nerderyandmurdery.com. That's our hub for everything about the show. You can get links to the episode, pictures about the items we talked about, plus you can find a link to our YouTube list, which Zig so often updates.
Yes, the YouTube list has videos of the things that we talked about on the nerdery side, including full videos, so you can see basically what we've been talking about, and some really great scenes.
Awesome. You can also find the link to our merchandise page, where if you wish to show off your nerdery murdy fandom, please do consider doing that. The costs, the profits from that, along with the our Patreon, which you can also find the link to on our website. Our patrons do help with the cost of the show. It does cost to keep this show on the air, keep producing it, uploading our website, and everything that goes along with that. So do please consider purchasing some merchandise or becoming a patron. Along with your patronage, you do get extra episodes. So if you're looking for extra nerdery and murder, we do have exclusives that you can only get if you are a patron.
That is true. Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. And last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It helps us and helps others find our content to listen to the topics that we discuss. So with that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
and I'm Jeffrey with your murdery.
Cue the music.